Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
So look, every year, GP Strategies spends some time doing global research around what are the top trends in learning. And we do this through a series, through both surveys and interviews with our partners around the world. You know, the reason why I think we're in a good position to kind of talk about learning trends is often where GP comes into this conversation is consultation around the right technology, the right design approach, the right approach to managing learning in the first place. And so we kind of come in as being very content agnostic, very technology and platform agnostic. So, you know, it now enables us to be open enough to really explore broadly what are the trends. And it's important to us as a company that we do keep track of the trends, because we need to be able to respond to our partners when they ask us, hey, what's going on with blockchain and learning? Somebody mentioned that to us. Or what's going on with X learning platform? Or how are you guys hearing around addressing leadership issues in this market? You know, so they're the types of questions we get. That's why we do it internally, so we can make sure we're plugged in. But we also want to make sure we're sharing that with folks like you on this call. And today we're having a panel discussion. So I have invited 3 panelists who are going to help share their opinions, their experience, their hopes and dreams for learning, for their business, for their market. So I've got Cindy Dermawan, who is the head of Reskilling and Capabilities Development for United Overseas Bank, for UOB, based in Singapore. Cindy, do you want to quickly say hello? Let's make sure your microphone's working.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Ben and team, for the invite. Looking forward.
Welcome. We're looking forward to hearing from you. And we've also got Teresa Dewdney, who is the Learning and Development Manager for Inscape. And she's based in Sydney, Australia. Do you want to say hello, Teresa?
Yes, hello all. Happy afternoon.
And maybe, Teresa, for those of you folks who don't know Inscape, I mean, UOB is a bank. Inscape, could you just shed a little bit of light for us about Inscape and some of the brands and entities that have worked within Inscape?
Yes, so globally we're a automotive distributor and retailer, in fact the world's largest independent. And in Australia, we're responsible, we have 3 parts of business: distribution of Subaru and Peugeot Citroën. We have AutoNexus, which is a major parts and logistics company working particularly in automotive. And then we have a series of retail dealerships under the brand of Trevette in Subaru, Melbourne, and in Queensland.
Okay, so yeah, Citroën, Subaru, these are brands that I think everyone will know around retail distribution of these vehicles in a range of markets, not just Australia, of course. And then we've also got Vijay Jeyakumaran, who is the training manager, head of training for Berge. Vijay, do you want to say hello and just quickly, in a sentence, say what Berge focuses on?
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. Glad to see all of you. Berge Bulk, we are actually dry bulk movers. We transport over the marine with dry bulk vessels from iron ore to other dry bulk cargo. So we shift cargo around the world.
Thanks, Vijay, and thank you to all 3 of you for joining. We really appreciate your time. We know that it's an unusually busy January for all of you, as it is for us as well. I'm very excited to have Cindy, Teresa, and Vijay on as our panelists today, because they're really coming from very different industries, different challenges, different learning cultures, different learning objectives, different technology decisions, different learning decisions. And so my hope is that we can all, I guess, learn from them and find some meaning for your industries or wherever you're coming from within your organization. So again, for all of our participants who have joined today, do use the chat to pose questions and to comment throughout, and we will be moderating and reviewing that. My name is Ben Kia. This is one of the better photos. Most of them are terrible. So I look after learning solutions for APAC. I based in Sydney, Australia, and I specifically head up Australia, Singapore, and Malaysia for our business. And I spend a lot of time focusing on workforce transformation. And I'll be hosting our panel discussion today, which the format of which is going to be going through a series, not too many, but a series of questions for our panelists, but then also interweaving some of those learning trends that have emerged globally, but then focusing in on those which have really come out on top for APAC. So it is going to be very APAC specific. So before we jump into the 2021 trends, I want to start with our first question. Obviously, COVID, there's a whole range of disruptions that affected 2020. COVID-19 being a big one, which has had massive ramifications for the way that we work and the way that we learn. So I want to ask each of you this question. What are your 2020 lessons learned, and what do you feel are the lasting impacts? What do you see carrying forward into 2021 and beyond? You know, is it just a temporary thing, or are we going to see some things probably change forever, or at least until the next big, massive global disruption hits us? So let's start, Vijay, from your perspective on Berge. What are your lessons learned, and what are the impacts you see carrying forward?
Thanks, Ben. Well, from our company, from maritime industry, it has been traditionally more focused towards classroom-based training. I would say we use a lot of huge simulators for engine training, 360 degrees navigational simulators for our navigators to train in a real life situation. So it has been more on in a classroom environment, a physical environment. And when training centers start shutting down early in the year, we started going into shock. Okay, now classroom trainings is not available anymore around the globe. We used to send guys to classroom training around the globe before they bought the vessels. So we started to see, okay, we are being chopped off from our normal routine training environments. So what are we going to do next? So that was a huge shock, and we started looking into cloud-based technology. Maritime has been actually harnessing the cloud-based technology slowly, and given naturally to the next 4 to 5 years, it will have been a norm of training. But what we saw that this situation actually has accelerated the shift to technology-based learning and cloud-based learning. So a lot of training centers adapted very fast to using or converting the lessons or the training to cloud-based and using remote technology. It was more of a hit and run or trial in the first few months, but then started to become a sort of a norm. And then start of this year, we're going to see a lot of normalized cloud-based or remote trainings. And we expect to see these now that the industry tested the benefits of this. We expect to see the benefits of this carrying over the next 5 to 10 years. In fact, we'll be moving more into the VR and AR, in fact, for the next few years.
Okay. So one of the things that I heard there is that a pivot to technology now, is it primarily virtual classroom delivery, you know, via Zoom or WebEx or Teams? Is that the primary mechanism, or have you also increased other digital forms of learning like e-learning as well, which has been for 2020 the biggest shift for you guys going from classroom?
I'll say both sides. Zoom, having a training session via Zoom or Teams, it was new to the industry and for us. And now we have started delivering programs, senior program, cadet progression programs over platforms such as Zoom. E-learning, it has been always around, but now we are looking into really instructional-led and a well-designed e-learning, which allows the learners to take control of their learning and be a self-directed learning.
So previously, e-learning was more of, I'm not going to say a stopgap, but it was, you know, let's get this e-learning out there. We're not focused as much maybe on the learner engagement side of it, more just on getting the content out to learners. But now COVID has made you focus more on how to get the most from e-learning. Is that what I'm hearing, Vijay?
I will say so.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Vijay, for sharing. I think we all have a slice of what Vijay's talking about. Let me hear from Cindy. What about for you and for UOB? What are lessons learned for 2020, and how is it going to carry forward?
Okay, thank you, Ben. First of all, let me just clarify that I don't know if you all can learn from us, but I am certainly happy to share our experience, acknowledging that there's still a lot for us to learn also. So looking back, actually, it's a quite long story, but let me try to cut it short and see. At the end of 2019, actually, we just started to embark on this massive reskilling program group-wide, all 26,000 of us across the region. And it is a huge effort and undertaking there because it's the first time that we have such a massive learning, and we were introducing a very new way of learning, and it's not a classroom only, but it is a blended learning where we actually partner with GP to deliver that a learning experience. So entering that 2020, we were probably in our first or second month of the program, and of course everyone was excited and then looking forward to see the result. Then COVID hit, and the immediate response was, okay, let's readjust our KPI and let's not go as aggressive as we had wanted to. So we were getting ready to kind of scale down, and we were getting ready to kind of getting the probably pushback from our colleagues, right? I think it's this new experience, and a lot of people are probably not comfortable with even the technology that we are using. So we immediately kind of switched gear from blended learning to 100% virtual. Surprisingly, the feedback that we have received in the earlier days of COVID, actually a very pleasant surprise to see that people were actually very tolerant and willing to learn. I think GP team was with us in the earlier days back in October 2019. Trying to even log into the platform was an issue. I think Oliver was there, Nita was there. We were like, are we able to do this? Logging into the system was an issue. COVID hit, everybody geared up, and actually we ended up with more completion and more successes than we had thought we could achieve without COVID. So I think the learning there for us is really, given the right environment, given the right push, and of course support in place, I think our effort in learning transformation, pushing the learning culture, actually worked for us really well under this COVID situation. And of course, the challenge moving forward is, can we continue? Can we take on that momentum and really continue to inculcate that learning mindset?
Make it BAU, continue to make it even more BAU for all learners.
Yeah.
And what's interesting for Cindy and for UOB is that, pivoting to kind of a more modern social micro-learning experience wasn't something that was triggered by COVID, in a way that you were better positioned to continue to roll out personal development and reskilling initiatives because you'd already started exploring it in 2017, but for the reskilling program, the Future Skills program, that started in the middle of 2019, right? So what was the original driver in 2019 for you to start to look at this? If it wasn't COVID, what was it?
Well, actually, because I think we had experienced success in Leadership Right by You, another development program targeted at a smaller subset of audience, right? That was the first time people were introduced to the new learning experience. And we thought that this is actually working for us. But once again, the Leadership Right by You audience is really, I would say, more self-driven already to begin with, right? And then moving into Better You or our reskilling program, we are targeting all of us in the bank, and I think all of us know that there's a lot of people who need a lot of.
How many people are we talking about? How many markets and people? Just to give people the idea of the scale.
Sure. Yeah, for Better You, we're actually looking at 7 countries across the region, and the target audience was 15,000 folks across the 7 countries. And actually, we have until December 2021 to complete that 15,000 of us. But I'm very happy to see that at the end of last year, we've touched more than 10,000 people, and we're on track to complete all 15,000 of us by June or July of this year. So initially with Better You, again, going back to your question, then what we wanted to see is really how can we inculcate that self-driven learning. And right now, I think with that technology that we have placed and the engagement, people are seeing, hey, actually this can happen. This is not as hard as I think.
So something I'd love to hear from the chat, and feel free to share your experience for everyone who's listening. One of the big points that Cindy made there is that COVID actually somehow had a psychological impact on their learners. So nothing really changed in terms of accessing the learning platform. You still needed to enter your username and password. Those facts were still there, but somehow all of a sudden those issues just evaporated. And then we also saw that completion skyrocketed. We've spoken about it a lot, at why completion has really jumped up to a really fantastic level. And it's because I think people all of a sudden go, wow, I got to do this. This is no longer some virtual, I think, was always perceived as some optional thing when compared to classroom training, which was the real thing. There was this mental, psychological gap between virtual, digital, and classroom, which was the primary purpose. So we've seen that psychological shift in adoption occur, not just for UOB, but around. I'd be interested to hear in the chat, has anyone else had a similar experience of that? Thank you, Cindy, for sharing your lessons learned there for 2020 and where you see things going. Teresa, so from an automotive retail kind of experience in the Australian market or in and around the region, what's your experience for 2020 and looking ahead into 2021?
Thanks, Ben. I'd echo some of the points that Vijay made in terms of the idea of traditional learning in automotive. So particularly when we talk about what we're doing, we have the sales and product side, and then we have a lot of the technical training side. And that was very much about bringing people to training to be hands-on. And I think once COVID hit and borders shut, the need to find different ways of connecting with people and to use technology to be able to build skills and really practical hands-on skills is really, really important. And we're only just scratching the surface with that now. I think remote working also had some impacts on people too, but maybe not so much from the frontline automotive, but in dealing with our own staff. People were in their own homes, so how do we reach them? How do we connect with them? You couldn't bring people into rooms to workshop, to discuss, to challenge. Even in the creation of learning, I think that became a real challenge. How did you work with your colleagues to come up with ideas? And I think being nimble and agile, the things that you used to do that you took ages to build or conceive and plan and pilot and you had 6 months to get it up and running. COVID meant you didn't have that anymore. Things were changing very quickly. You were responding, and I think that's going to continue. So how we build skills virtually, how we be more responsive and nimble, and probably some ideas from Agile there in terms of trialing and learning as opposed to necessarily getting it perfect right the first time.
So more agility, I guess, realizing that you really can accelerate on things that were once took months, now take weeks kind of thing. And I know that you had a vision, Teresa, that you wanted that was inspired by the situation of 2020, right? Share a little bit around the lessons learned, a little bit of the vision that you want to achieve, which is still ongoing, but what are the lessons learned that pushed you in that direction of exploring this new approach to learning for Inscape and for Subaru specifically?
For me, I think the vision is, I think, how we connect with people and how we create a culture of learning that's more two-way. When we've talked a lot about automotive and cars and brands, people are extremely passionate, including the people who sell them. And so one of the kind of insights for me is, as we've been doing our learning in the past, it tends to be one way. But the best people who are advocates for the products you're offering and share the best learnings is about how do you actually use and tap into that and reach people. The power of binding learning into small chunks, and I think, Cindy, you were talking about that, so that kind of people don't have huge chunks of time to sit down. So wanting to try and shift from modular, traditional blocked learning to experiences and communities around the passion for the work and the brands, and giving people the opportunity to dip in and dip out for their learning when and where they're ready, with that kind of skills or mindsets or technical training, and building that into something kind of a YouTube for learners, the stuff that people really enjoy in their personal lives. How do we bring that into their professional lives?
And I think there's some unique challenges that each of your businesses present, whether it's geographical, different learning cultures having to tackle. I think UOB, that's probably a big one, just different levels of learning maturity as well. Vijay, I know in the shipping industry, you've got people that don't have internet access working in a chain of command on a ship in the middle of the ocean and aren't back for months. So how do you engage learners in that environment? And then, for Teresa, you've got very technical, hands on the spanner skills that are typically done in person with the equipment, with the tools. Plus, you've got also retail. You've got to know the car. You've got to see the car. You've got to sell the car without actually being able to go to a dealer. So we've all kind of got those issues that we've got to address, and some of those are emerging in the chat. So I don't know if you guys are seeing the chat here. We've got a question here from Jessica that says the big challenge they faced was how do you go digital when folks are in a plant and maybe don't have access to computers? And look, there are quick fixes to this, and there are more long-term strategic fixes to this. Any suggestions from Jessica from the panel around how to address that? I know GP has approaches, but I'd love to hear from you guys first. Anyone want to say I've got something to add? Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe if I could just quickly jump in here, Ben. Although we are a bank, but we do have a number, probably not a lot, but we do have a group of colleagues who do not have access to the same situation here, do not have access to computer. But
branch staff,
branch
who have
staff, exactly. And the beauty of the option that the technology has offered us is actually we have option for colleagues to do it over using their own personal phone, or because this is learning anytime, anywhere, people actually they've done it at home using their own personal. Well, I know some people do not like to do the learning outside their office hours, but I think during COVID there were windows where people were working from home, even for branch people, right? So we tried a variety of creative ways to give them access, but number one is I think the access via mobile phone is a great help there.
Right, and you need to have a design that has that in mind, and a technology or a platform that creates an experience that makes people come back. Everyone comes back to YouTube. Everyone comes back to social media, but not everyone's coming back to traditional corporate e-learning trainings, for example. So how do you kind of get that engagement for people to want to do it in their own time so they're excited about it?
Yeah, and Ben, I think to add to that is I think we've received a lot of feedback from our colleagues that saying that the 12 weeks program, the chunks that we are doing with Intrepid is actually, a lot of them actually have done it via mobile on their way to work. So
on a train, on a bus.
Yes, so that's really helpful.
So look, I can't spend too much. I want to go on to the next bit, but I'll just say a couple of things that other organizations we're working in the power industry and manufacturing is setting up kiosks. That's more of a long-term solution where there are kiosks for learners to access. And then because scheduling and planning in a plant environment is critical, working with managers to schedule learners with some time to go and participate in that learning at those kiosks has been very successful. Mobile, as Cindy already said. But the big thing here is chunking the learning, right? Making sure that learning is 15 minutes rather than 2 hours or 1.5 hours, and finding a way to blend that with maybe some virtual sessions or something like that so you can spread out the learning. I think to Cindy's point, that's been effective because I can do a little burst and get a bit of value. If it was a big chunk of learning, it would be hard to do it on a train, on a bus, find time to schedule it, pressure on the managers in a plant environment to keep that plant operational. So I haven't forgotten about the other questions here around, measurement is a really big one here. I'm going to come back to that, guys. So let me just go through some of the trends first. And I'm going to have our group respond to that because I think some of the questions that are emerging here will be affected by some of these trends. So look, these are global results, and I'm going to zero in on the ones that probably rise to the surface from APAC, right? So number one, learning trend, and I think this was heavily influenced probably by what's going on in North America with the Black Lives Matter movement and an increased focus on diversity and inclusion. But it is a perennial trend, a perennial focus for all businesses, whether it's women in leadership positions, whether it's harnessing diversity in your teams, whatever that may be. That's the number one trend that emerged, a culture of accessibility. And so, yes, we're talking about accessibility for folks with disabilities in our business, making sure that they can learn, but also accessibility. I think this rose to the top, accessibility of learning in a COVID environment, work from home, work on a plane, work on a train, well, not so much a plane. We might remember what they were, right? But working from different devices. So that's something that's emerged as a top trend. Learning in the flow of work. So it's no longer a learning as an event. but it's learning while I'm doing my work. And so I'm not just talking about a learning intervention, even to what Cindy's talking about, a stretched micro-learning experience. I'm also talking about Slack, Teams, other collaboration tools, Yammer, and different platforms, Degreed, et cetera, that allow learners to connect and consume learning as they're working through it. Learning ecosystems and experiences. So this is a big trend. It's not just here is our e-learning in our classroom. Now learning environments are turning into an ecosystem that might involve multiple technologies or solutions that serve different purposes coming together to create a unified experience for learners. Trying to grapple that is a big issue, a big challenge for a lot of organizations because there's a lot of noise. There is a lot of technology out there. Anyone who is currently thinking about, hey, well, let's look at Degreed, let's look at LinkedIn Learning, let's look at Fuse, let's look at some learning platforms. There's so much out there, and everyone says they do everything very well, but the realities are different. So that's a big trend, and it is one of the APAC trends. Here's one that people get surprised about is blockchain in L&D. And feel free if you know about blockchain and its applications in L&D to drop in the chat. But the big focus there is initially around credentialing. So having universal credentials that are secure and transferable and accessible anywhere. As I learned, that is tracked in the blockchain. So credentialing is one big area. But really around the management and security and access of learning assets to learners is where blockchain is emerging as a potential application. And it's even emerging around the delivery of learning and the automation of learning. So adaptive learning experiences through assets being held within blockchain structures. So that's not one of the trends we're going to focus on today because it is a big, unwieldy beast to discuss. An investment in innovation. Now, that sounds like a throwaway statement, but one of the things that we're seeing is organizations are actually investing in creating hubs of innovation to trial, to prototype, to test, to really explore what should learning look like in this organization to varying degrees. We work with General Motors, for example, and help them with their innovation garage to really look at different learning applications. How can we test and fail fast and use data to come up with new approaches for learning and addressing that specific organization's challenges? So that's a growing trend, is just dedicated to innovation, which has typically not been something that folks have invested in the learning space because you've just got this toolbox and it's fixed. That's no longer the case. Establishing these last two are the other two that we're really going to focus on. Establishing critical mindsets. So what we're talking about here is really twofold. One is mindsets in the business and their way they view learning, right? So the critical mindsets of learning that we need in the business to be agile as an organization, to respond to disruption, to quickly adapt and adjust. That has been a big focus. And there's lots and lots of ways to address it. Cindy's already referenced mindsets in terms of, hey, we've been deploying some experiences and the mindsets have started to change and we're starting to see that become BAU, right? So that's one layer of the mindsets. But the other layer of mindsets, which comes in connection with learning in the flow of work, with user-led learning, is the mindset to want to learn in the first place. So before, when you had a classroom training or an e-learning, you could prescribe it. It's top down. Hey, learners, you have to be here at this time, at this day, and you're going to have a trainer who's going to talk you through it. They're going to tell you what you need to know. But with modern learning experiences being micro, user-generated, blended into the flow of work, just like YouTube, you've got to want to go there yourself. So to get there, learning focuses more on changing people's mindset rather than just giving a skill. So I can't just say, here is 10 steps to delegate and expect people to perceive that. I need to drive a mindset and motivation to want to look at delegation in order to get that to happen, because the user is in control. If the mindset isn't there to be accountable, for example, that might be a foundational mindset. Growth mindset. These mindsets that I focus on training, I spend more minutes building a mindset than maybe I do even developing the skill. Because the mindset is the big barrier for change before you even get to skills and behaviors. So that's a big trend, especially in APAC. And the last one, which I think we're already hearing from our panel here, is evolving roles and responsibilities in L&D. So, from GP's perspective, what we see happening is, as learning experiences change, as ecosystems change, as we deal with work from home, what a learning team does in a company is changing. Now, all of a sudden, instead of just going out to the market and saying, I need this training, and then someone goes and delivers it, maybe I need a whole range of assets, and I need a content curator in my company. Maybe now I need someone who's focused on moderation and engaging learners. But not just that, but how are we designing learning? It's no longer that, give me the time and event outline and I will pick the one that I like most, and then you go and train that. Now it's an agile development model where the solution is developed over time, right? So developing with design thinking, with agile development methodologies is an evolving piece that learning teams are grappling with. And so the big ones we're going to focus you guys in on to respond to the next question are 3, 4, 7, and 8. Learning in the flow of work, learning ecosystems and experiences, establishing critical mindsets, and establishing roles and responsibilities. So my first question, given those trends that I've just spoken about, especially those ones that I've highlighted, what are your big priorities in 2021, and which of those trends do you see being really relevant for you guys, and in what ways? So, Teresa, I'll start with you.
Well, then I can't leverage off the great comments of my other panelists. That's a shame. I think probably for me, one of the ones that's been triggered by the work that we're doing now is the ecosystems of learning. Probably the fact that there is no one solution to rule them all, that it's a combination of technologies, of events, of online, of offline, of what we put out, of what people bring in and what they contribute. And for me, I think mapping that and understanding it and helping other people move beyond thinking about what a classroom is and what training is really, really challenging. And I think that's been a real struggle with when we're working with people, like we're doing a product launch at the moment, and people go, but what about the training? Everything we do, when we connect, when we talk with people, what we share, the messaging we give them, and every interaction is part of that kind of learning experience. And getting people to understand that, that means that everybody in the organisation, not just the L&D department, has to be working on song to raise the capability or to engage people and get their mindsets about wanting to take part of the learning. So I think ecosystems, and with that then comes the revolving roles and responsibilities. Even very simply, our technical trainers who were used to dealing with people in a workshop and with a spanner in hand now have gimbals and phones and webinars and create videos and edit. So there's a real shift in what the skills you need to bring this sort of stuff to life.
And yeah, I think you also mentioned in your team, one of your other team members has come in from, I think, a marketing role. So do you want to share a little bit about your vision for that as an evolving role and responsibility? Yeah,
so one of the great opportunities with COVID and has been change, and one of my new colleagues comes from a media planning background, but she's also been working with social media and comms, and that's really going to be critical as we start to implement changes to the business. How do we communicate really effectively? How do we, when we start to introduce two-way communication, having someone who's used to engaging and understanding how to respond to commentary, how to engage with people when they're on the platform. So I think that also means that a big chunk of someone's job is actually being present in the learning environment, in that ecosystem on a much more regular basis, not just uploading a course or running a report. So I think we're going to see different skill sets coming in, more than just traditional, say, instructional design or facilitation. People with really good communication and media skills.
Okay, cool, yeah. And I'm really excited about seeing how that evolves for you guys and moving from learning as an event, right, where the whole engine has to start up again to get the learning ready, versus learning as a continuous stream where you're just inserting learning into an existing stream, because it takes the same amount of energy to get any train to move its first 5 miles as it does its next 20 miles, right? And I think, with a new vehicle launch or a new product launch, having to restart that engine every time must be taxing.
Completely agree, Ben. And you can do, I think, in your idea around agile, you don't have to wait till you've got all the answers to start piloting it. So how you can start to combine events now, how you can test and learn, even with the technology you've got on hand at the moment. I think that's some of the things we're starting to look at, to say to people, what's the training program going to be? Well, it's not determined fully yet, because we will respond as events unfold to the needs of the people, to what's happening in the market. So there is no, to say to people, what's the finite solution? People have to also be comfortable that there's a bit of ambiguity about that. There's a framework and a plan, but you need to be able to respond to what's happening with learners and with the market to be able to get really good outcomes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Teresa, sharing a little bit of insight. So, Cindy, over to you. So, your big learning priority or big mission that you want to achieve, and what are the trends that are going to be most relevant for you?
Yeah, Ben, I think for UOB, reskilling continues to be the main focus for the next few years. In fact, right, this is not a one-year engagement kind of thing, but what you have highlighted in terms of the learning trend, Zach has kindly put on the chat here.
Yeah.
All of these four are really very important to us, but if I were just to kind of focus on how do we continue the momentum that we have, that mindset, how do we make people want to learn, like Ben, you have mentioned earlier, that's the key first. And then when people want to learn, I think we also need to focus on how do we provide that learning ecosystem and experience. So then they already want to learn, and hopefully with that experience going through that learning, they continue to, wow, I'm successful in this, I want to continue learning. And I think to support that, as an L&D practitioner, in fact, the entire HR, we've also seen that we are no longer traditional L&D where we create programs. In fact, a lot of the programs we actually bought with our training partners, right? A lot of our time is now spent on actually influencing our stakeholders and advising, and hopefully kind of telling them, oh, look, this is not happening yet, but it's going to happen soon, and this is what you need to do now. So that skills, I think L&D practitioners in UOB, we are trying to now upgrade ourselves in that, moving from L&D to more of an advisor to the business.
Consultancy. Would you say education is a critic, because
yes,
if someone's whole life experience with learning has been lectures at university, e-learning and compliance training in the company, and classroom training, and now you're saying none of that, or just a little bit of that,
Yeah, and in fact, I think there are a lot of times when we have brilliant talents with a lot of experience in that field, but not really a lot of business experience or exposure. There is a lot of disconnect there, and we find it not to be very effective. So, upgrading our L&D colleagues priorities for us too.
Yeah, I think we could put that under establishing critical mindsets, because from a GP perspective, when we're working, whether it's at an RFP stage or actually in a project or an existing partnership we have with one of our clients, the mindset thing is our biggest hurdle from the outside looking in, right? How do you actually show someone something they haven't seen before and let them know that this is actually what you're asking for, you just haven't seen it yet, and it's a big battle. And then beyond that, the stakeholder engagement. So what we find more than any other period in our history as a company, change management is a fundamental part of the design of an experience. So how do I launch an experience whilst also considering the change management dimension, and not just of the learners, but of their managers, of the key stakeholders, so that's something that we devote way, way, way more time than we ever used to, where it was more just an event and someone disappears at a hotel for 2 days and then reappears at work. It wasn't something you had to think about as much. So, okay. Thank you so much, Cindy. Vijay, your big learning priorities in 2021, where are you going, and what are the trends that resonate with you as you move towards that?
Thanks, Ben. I think for us, the biggest learning priority similarly will be a mindset change. Is actually growing the culture of learning as a team and learning as a group when they actually on the vessel for 6 months, 7 months. So they are actually working as a unit. So that's where the mind shift change needs to come in, when that's our learning priority for this year. On-the-job learning has already been in place for many years and is part of a norm, but now it has become a necessity. the new guys who are joining the vessels actually are coming on board, not fully trained. They may be having some e-learning or some video-based training, and the knowledge actually has to be actually sharpened and actually have to be hands-on trained on board the vessel. And the senior guys on board are starting to realize that if they don't learn as a team, have a change of mindset, and actually teach others on how to work as a team to harness this technology and this new knowledge, the work downstream next few months is going to be a big challenge to the entire unit. So that's where the team is actually realizing now, okay, that's the mindset change we have to go through. We have to learn together, and harnessing the technology from the management side, which we have put in place. The way of learning is actually changing. That's our priority for this year. And the roles and responsibility is for the L&D team has actually shifted as well. We're no longer looking into just pumping down information and asking the guys, okay, finish the learning and just show us certificates. It's more of actually having a full cycle. Okay, what if you learn? What if you demonstrated in your work? And we are looking at the success profiles, the success factors, and then we're reversing it back into the design of the program itself. So that's where we are having our responsibilities and change in the L&D team, and as well as changing mindset.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Vijay? Given the unique nature of working on a ship, right? A large ship where safety, that you're an island, right? You're disconnected. Whatever goes on in that ship is there's really no other way to escape that situation. So it has to be done well, it has to be managed well. So you need an effective chain of command. So in an environment where you've got a captain, a first mate, a very specific chain of command, where in my mindset I'm ingrained to follow orders and to not speak back, to not give feedback, maybe, and there's a nervousness. Plus you layer that in with the culture, the country culture. You're going to have people maybe from China or from India or from Singapore. You might have folks from Scandinavia or, different folks in different parts of this. How are you guys addressing the mindsets of a modern leadership environment in a shipping chain of command environment?
Traditionally, it used to be a very command and control leadership, which is why we took a big push into our senior leaders training. We looked deeply into it, and we rolled out the senior leaders program for this year. In fact, before the COVID situation was supposed to be done face-to-face, but we adapted fast.
We spent months building a classroom version only to have to pivot to virtual in about 15 days' time for these captains of ships who are, might I say, a very discerning audience.
Yes, but they adapted quite well to it, and the feedback from that was that they liked the course we delivered online. And we are actually hitting it from the top itself. We're changing the mindset of the top leaders, so they can actually walk the talk and actually demonstrate the mentorship, the on-the-board learning to the junior officers, and they in turn actually roll out the sharing culture, learning culture to the junior ranks as well. So together, it recycles back into the single unit, the single vessel itself, and the entire culture of learning changes. And that's our main takeaway for this year, and what we're trying to establish for this year as well.
Yeah, I know that often people talk about, we deploy design thinking, empathizing, learner centricity when we're doing very modern, large-scale digital learning experiences. But we also deployed it with Vijay and the team there because this was going to be traditional classroom. We still did it because it's such a unique population. We really spent time together understanding who are these learners, what's their mindset. And the result of that was, initially it was going to be very content centric. Here are the 7 leadership skills you've got to learn. And yes, some skills were addressed, but it shifted our priority to spend more time on, as Vijay said, changing the mindset, giving people the will to want to do things differently before you even give them the what to do differently. So I'm glad to hear that virtual version of that hasn't diminished the efficacy of the experience for those learners. So guys, look, we're coming into the last 10 minutes, and I'm just going to ask one more question. I just would like to give you guys 1 minute each to answer this question, and then I'm going to go into Q&A because we've got a whole bunch of questions piling up that I'm excited to get to. And it's not, you can't say I'm excited about seeing Manchester United win a premiership after 7 years or something like that. It's got to be something work-related. What are you excited about in 2021? I'll start with Cindy.
Sure. Thank you, Ben. I think I'm going to speak from my personal experience. I think I'm very, very excited to see the opportunity that we have in front of us, learning from 2020, even at the toughest time, I think we've experienced, I would say, even like a turning point in terms of learning culture. So I'm excited to explore more, and I want to challenge the team. In fact, how do we give more and provide the better experience for our colleagues? So that's
the momentum, the surprise momentum that came out of a shift to learning from COVID, and see what you can do with that, what more can be done, right? Okay. Yes. Thank you so much, Cindy. Vijay.
Thanks, man. I think the most exciting thing for us this year is going to be recognizing a group of people that was not recognized previously. Mentors. We really want to recognize the mentors and encourage the mentors on the vessels. And we are coming up with the award this year, Mentor of the Year for our fleet. So we want to recognize them. And it's not going to be rank-based where the top leaders is going to be the mentors. Anybody can be a mentor, and we want to know how much has affected the next person working to them. And that's the big takeaway we're looking at, and that's the greatest thing we're looking at for this year for our fleet.
Okay. So focusing on, and you're excited to get more mentorship and a mindset around mentoring happening across the business, including on the ship, on board, right?
Yes, on board as well. I mean, technology is there. We're giving them the tools. Empowerment is there. But how are the guys using it, and how are they sharing it? That's what we're aiming towards for this year.
You've got all those people with that great experience and institutional knowledge. What are we doing about that, right? Yeah, okay. Thanks, Vijay. Teresa, what are you most excited about for 2021?
I think it's going to be opening the door that more fully that we've just kind of nudged open over the last wee while with using some of the e-learning and the shift that we started to make. It's throwing the door wide open to creating a real community around the brands that we have, particularly the work we're doing with Subaru, to really to create a whole ecosystem of learning and to start something that's just going to grow much more organically and much more nimbly. So yeah, I think there's a door being opened through COVID and through what we've needed to do, and it's going to be how do we actually push it wide open and make most of that momentum.
Okay, yeah. So I'm hearing from Cindy and from Teresa a bit of common kind of approach there. You got momentum. What are we going to do about it, right? We don't want to waste it. And I think some of the things that we spoke about earlier, your ability to change the mindsets of folks in the business is going to be crucial to capitalizing on that momentum. So that's why it's a trend. So look, I had some other questions here, but let's go to, and we will stick around for a few minutes after. I don't know if all of our panelists can, but I'll certainly stick around, and if you guys can stick around a bit. But we've got 6 minutes now to kind of hit some of these questions, and we've been going through them. There's one here around measurement, which I definitely want to address. But there's two questions that I think we can kind of join together both from Peggy, right? First one at the top was around, psychological safety. How do you actually, for example, Cindy, when people are online on a platform and we're asking them to chat and sharing a discussion with 100 other learners, to actually, that it's okay to do that it's okay to share and participate, and to work virtually and to communicate and engage virtually, but then layer that in with just generally, how do you change their mindset to participate, their attitude to learning? I know we've got a philosophy on that, but what's your opinion on that for the change of mindset and psychological safety for learners?
I think if I were just to add, maybe the harder days were the earlier part where actually back in 2019 when we started to introduce a new learning management system, that was really tough because that was the first time that people have to go online and register class and all that. So that part, with that part, we really did a lot of hand-holding, literally physical hand-holding.
Yeah, literally being next to them as they were logging in for the first time, right?
Exactly. And I think going through that experience, people felt that they were very supported. And not to mention that I think with example of LRB or Better You, where we have to engage 12 weeks virtually, I must say that the support that we get from that Inscape platform, working with GP, I think that has been tremendous. I think you guys probably have your own data set to see how many people actually came in to GP strategies to say I cannot log in and whatnot in the earlier days, and they all experience, I think, a good response and support. I think during the virtual meeting as
kickoff, the launch,
the launch, and I think the conversation was very much, I think, supported by the moderator. And even the virtual conversation, as well as one thing that I have learned also, people were so receptive of, we have this exercise at the end of the segment where they have to videotape themselves. And myself, I'm not a fan of doing that, but we were surprised to see that how many people were actually, they learned for the first time. And you can see from the quality of video, it's pretty bad, but they took the step and they were comfortable enough to do so. So I think the support, I think, was key there.
Yeah, and if I could just share a couple of little nuances, when not just when we GP or the panelists on here, but when you go out and you look to explore different learning modalities, the reason why empathizing, the first stage of design thinking is so critical is it helps you understand the culture and the readiness of that learning, of the business and of those learners. And then you build into the design, because this is agile development, things, literally activities that they will do that will build up that sense of safety, but also build up that muscle memory. So, for example, one of the things that we did before Better You launched, which is the one that Cindy was just referring to, there was a big fear in all of us. Will anyone actually do this? Even for just a simple discussion, a text discussion, there was a fear that no one will participate. So the first thing is trust your learners, because your learners are learning like this outside of work already. They're already going in and searching themselves and finding things themselves when they want it. It's already there. They're already chatting on, having arguments on Facebook anonymously or, whatever that is. So that already exists. So trust your learners, number one. And then that will embolden your design. So what we did, for example, is we started off with just some simple discussions. Make sure the questions are non-confrontational. And you build up, in this case, over an 8-week or a 9-week or a 12-week experience, more complexity, more sharing. And to Cindy's point, we have moderators that, I guess, are really learner engagement champions. They are there as a single point of contact, not just via email, but in the platform. So Cindy's posted something, our moderator or your moderator can give that person a badge to say, hey, congratulations on making your first post, and hey, and then comment and respond. And when people see that this is a community, they start to then say, maybe I can respond to somebody else. And so the muscle memory is built up through the design of the program. And one really interesting data point, when we first did a poll with some UOB learners, why are you here? Now, this is for a leadership program. The number one response from learners at the beginning was because my manager told me to be here. And that's because it was new, and that's how learning works, right? Like, as you get told by your manager to attend, especially for development programs. And then by the end of it, the feedback was, different. It was, I'm here because I'm excited about it, or this was interesting, or I see this was relevant to my job and my performance. And so acknowledge that you're going to get some resistance, but trust that they can change if you design it well to meet them, to make it ruthlessly relevant. So I know we're running out of time. I'm going to pose another question here, which was around, I'm just getting my list of questions here. Priscilla had a question around, now that learning interventions are the pinnacle due to COVID-19, how do you measure? Now, again, I got an idea on measurement here, but Teresa, given that you're in, sorry, Teresa, given that you're in an environment which there's both knowledge, right? You've got to learn the features of this car. There's technical skills, right? You've got to be able to turn the spanner this many degrees in order to lock that nut and, whatever that is. And there's skills, there's soft skills, sales, customer service, interactions, and management. You've got the whole gamut. How do you guys approach measurement today? And even if you feel like you want to do more, where do you see it going?
I think I'm wanting to play in the what do we want to do more
okay.
space.
Jump straight to more. Got it.
No, because this is sort of started. I think what's really interesting is the with technical, the measure is there is the completions and what have people seen and done. But I think the proof's in the pudding in terms of what people have done on the job. So if you've got some really good reporting, you can start to look at things like productivity of people in terms of technicians and hours and work. You can start to look at the quality of the repairs and the work. So you're starting to see, are people actually, if they're applying things correctly and doing the work well, we shouldn't have the issues that we've had before. So I think it's connecting, and I think probably it comes to the mindsets piece, and I certainly haven't even begun to crack it from the kind of sales side, particularly challenging when they're not in a dealer network, they're not actually staff that you can kind of directly influence. But it's really finding the outcomes that the business cares about to measure. So how does it move bottom line? And I think that's probably the biggest aha for me this year in terms of the vision we're trying to sell, is I can get excited in the technology and how cool is this, and at the end of the day, the people on the other end are really interested in what difference does it make to the bottom line. So those are things I think you need to measure more than the attendance and the completions. So finding a really strong link is challenging.
Yeah, I'm going to add to what Teresa said around, understanding what the outcomes are the business wants to achieve and kind of making sure you're measuring towards that. And I'm going to add in a layer of timing. When should you think about measurement in your planning process? Often measurement is something that happens in parallel to the development. So I'm building this, and then maybe measurement isn't even considered because all we want to measure is the happy sheets, and the completion rate or the assessment scores. But if you really want to measure behavioral change, performance impacts, we do something called measurement mapping. And it's been a revelation for me as a designer, because we're not always able to do it, right? Because sometimes you come into a project that's just not possible. But in a perfect world, when you're in that empathy phase, right, just figuring out who are the learners, also what are you measuring? And so what we do is you start off with the business outcomes, the big picture things, revenue, retention, whatever that may be. But then you move back a step. Okay, well, how do we know that those things are happening? And then you move back a step again to what we call the leading indicators. What are the specific behaviors that will tell you that this training is working? The first thing, so let's say it's sales, right? The first thing might be an increase in, for Teresa's business, it might be an increase in demos, vehicle demos. It might be an increase in client returns, clients come back. It might be an increase in these different things. And if you know, when you've built your measurement map, that they're the things that you want to happen, all of a sudden you can validate your content. The content I thought I was going to train now might evolve and change because these leading indicators are telling me really what I want to do is get more dealer demos. Well, let's have the training focus on making more dealer demos, because we know when there's more demos, that demos means more sales of cars, and more sales of cars means better revenue. So build measurement mapping into your design from the start, and then let that validate your content and change. Be brave enough to realize that maybe the content we thought was what we wanted was not correct in the first place. So hopefully that helps to address some of that measurement question. Thank you, Teresa, putting you on the spot there as per usual. So if we've got another question, I'm just looking at our list of questions here. We are out of time, by the way. I'm going to do one more question. If you have to drop off, completely understand. Now we've got a question about automotive technical training, but Vijay, I'm going to give this question to you because I know technical training, engine maintenance, there's a lot of hands-on training in your space. And you already mentioned that you're looking at VR and AR and other elements like that. The question is, delivering automotive technical training, one of the main challenges is interaction between the instructor and attendees during practical activities. What's the vision for this in a virtual world, in a remote world, in a disconnected world?
What we have actually looking into is more of a blended solution where the training takes part in a different stages, I will say. I mean, the trainees go through a session with the trainer through a Zoom or a virtual classroom where ideas exchange and lessons and theories are talked about. And then our vision when they're on board, keeping them with the VR sets or even AR tools, is for them to hands-on try it out. And that's where our mentors program is coming into place as well, where the guys actually try to help the guys who's learning on board as well. And the third part of this is when they're off the vessel. So together with the first part, knowledge gain, and then the second part, knowledge experience, the third part is going back to the instructor where there's a follow-up to validate the skills they've learned or to clarify any doubts they have with the experts. No matter they may have picked up a good skills with the mentors on board, it's always good to go back to the makers or to the experts to validate the questions they have and to ensure they have picked up the right skills and be delivered in the right way. So that's the framework we're looking at to ensure technical training is taking place in a well-rounded delivery.
it's a tough nut to crack, and I know, Teresa, we're also having conversations about that, but also Cindy, like systems training and other technical elements within a banking environment. It's all there, and I think so I'll share an example for a large submarine manufacturer. It's military security, so I can't mention the name of it, but states in the U.S. We do a lot of technical training, and honestly, the solution, we had ideas, but the solution came from them having an investment in an innovation kitchen. They had an innovation kitchen, GP has an innovation kitchen, and we're able to go and test and try quickly. What that looks like for them is, as Vijay said, a blended approach. We found, like, welding was a big issue. So we found a virtual welding system that has a bit of technology hold in your hand and use VR goggles, and it teaches you different welds. And it had like a 200% increase in speed to competency and increase in quality of welds, just from deploying this. But that wasn't enough. They also deployed a video-centric learning platform that enabled them to run traditional trainings, like a virtual training, but then learners could do e-learning and log in and watch a 2-minute video of an expert with their camera up in that piece of equipment and showing that, so they could watch that little bit of technical training. So video was a big part. But then, again, the innovation part is, how do we get the video to the learners? So another piece was Lapel Cameras. So having live sessions where the master engineer or the master technician has a camera on their lapel, and so has a live audience and can actually follow along with what they're doing with their hands free, so they can actually engage with the equipment and the tools. So look, some of this, of course, requires costs and investment, but the key part I want to say here is having that focus on innovation for dealing with things like technical training, which is tough doing virtually, is paramount. So feel free to tap into us and we'll share those stories, but it is probably, along with leadership training, one of the hardest things to get right virtually. So guys, look, thank you so much for your time. Teresa, Vijay, and Cindy, we really value that you're busy right now, and I hope everyone on the session, to go 10 minutes over and have 70+ people still on is a testament to how relevant and interesting this information was. So thank you for your time. Thank you to my GP team for helping moderate, and thank you to our participants for asking great questions and for joining us today. We'll be running a dedicated session on measurement mapping coming up in the next few months, so keep an eye out for that. But thank you again for everyone, and have a wonderful 2021.
This webinar is brought to you by GP Strategies. Together we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can access more webinars or download additional resources at gpstrategies.com/resource-library.